Hey everybody, this is Alex Amorosi and Dana Solara filling in
Ooh,
for Adam Elenbaas. Oh, did you like that? Do you
I
like that?
loved it. Yeah,
It's the Italian rolling of the R, right? A little spell. It's a
it
little-
was
Got
good.
it? Solana, we're filling in today for Adam Elenbaas. He is on vacation. We are going to take you through your horoscopes for April. We're going to focus on Mars's finally moving out of Cancer, back into Leo. And eventually, by the end of the month, even moving out of its shadow phase, one more opposition to Pluto, a trine to Neptune. Really interesting as Mars is leaving Cancer, which, was going to feel significantly different because we have been in that space for what feels like the better part of 1400 years. So, so we're
Actually.
actually, it's a little bit more pet is going to come. We'll talk more in detail about that as we get to it. So, as Adam likes to say, before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe and be sure to check out the latest events and classes at nightlightastrology.com. You can find me at alexamorosi.com where I do astrological readings. I also do intuitive readings. A lot of people don't know that, but that's actually what I did for years before I did astrology, and now I kind of combine the two. That's alexamorosi.com. You can also find me on Instagram at alexamorosihealing. And you can find me on Substack at The Subtle Universe. That's The Subtle Universe on Substack. You
Oh,
can find Dana, can
I'm
you say
sorry.
where isn't it?
I'm loving the announcer persona. I'm here for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Did anybody didn't hear that I'm Leo rising? Can you hear it now? This I was born for this shit. I love it.
You were
Um Dana, where can people find you?
self-help witch on all the places, YouTube, Instagram. I had a podcast that I had for a long time that I recently like revived along with my
Hmm.
Substack. It's called Ask an Astrologer. So you can find that. Yeah, self-help witch in most places or Ask an Astrologer.
So is that something where like people come on and ask you a question and
That's
you
the
respond?
idea. Yeah. Like submit your
Cool.
questions about astrology, about spirituality, anything that you want to know about astrology or a problem you think astrology can help with.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Love, love. Amazing. So that's where you can find the two of us. That's a really cool. I like that concept a lot. That's where you
Thank
can
you.
find the two of us, and you can always find out more about Adam and his work at nightlightastrology.com. He has wonderful offerings, great talks, classes. I think both of us have been through Adam's classes, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. They're really awesome. So that's our introduction. And now we're on to the astrology of April. Um, so the big thing we're going to look at, let me actually put the screen up so we can see together here. I finally got those of you who know me for doing solo videos on Adam's channel. I could never figure out how to get the asteroids out of the transits, but I finally did. So we have a chart more or less like what we would look at normally in a video when Adam is on. Oh God, we're unsupervised today. God help us. So here, so we're looking here. We're going to look at Mars today. So here's Mars at 27 degrees of Cancer. This is about April 11th. Mars is slowly right now as we're recording this, and towards the end of March, just barely picking up some steam as it's moving towards this endpoint of Cancer. So Mars will be moving through these anaretic degrees of Cancer around April 10th throughout April 16th. If we keep going forward by day, we see Mars by April 17th. 18th has moved into Leo, where one more time Mars is going to oppose Pluto. Mars opposed Pluto November 4th, I think, was the first time opposed Pluto when Pluto was still in Capricorn. So when Mars was moving through Cancer the first time. Mars then opposed Pluto the second time, January 4th through 5th, that around that region when Mars was retrograding back into Cancer. And this will be the final opposition we're setting up with Pluto. But before that happens, what's really interesting, and Dana pointed this out to me, just slipped my eye. As Mars moves into Leo, it will also trine Neptune, which is now in Aries. And Mars is the host of Neptune in Aries. So we're going to talk a lot about what that might signify too. I think that's very powerful in that Neptune is now starting to get aspected in Aries for the first time. And the moon will aspect Neptune as the first thing. Usually it's the moon because the moon moves fastest, but then Mercury, then Mars, and then Venus later on in April. you'll see here as Mars moves into Leo, Mars moves forward, and then we're by about April 25th, Mars is opposing Pluto at 3 degrees of Aquarius. That opposition really goes into effect as soon as Mars enters Leo and will be in effect all the way up through the very beginning of May. So if we use the 3 degree range of the Hellenistic astrologers, the engagement range, we get up to about May 2nd, where Mars is still in that opposition range of Pluto. And also, Mars will be leaving its retrograde degrees at that time. Mars began its retrograde, I believe it's 6 Leo in
I think you're
December.
right.
Yeah. And then so Mars is going to start moving on. So that's kind of a new chat. The whole moving out of Cancer back into Leo, there's the completion of some kind of story happening here. And as Mars moves into these new degrees, so moves on to 7 Leo and starts to move all the way through Leo, eventually move into Virgo, I think by the end of May. That's a whole new chapter in the Mars cycle. There's a whole new story that Mars is writing. So that's the sort of technicals of what we're going to look at today. Dana, what are your thoughts on just the general period of Mars in Cancer, this shift? Oh, damn
Yeah.
it. I'll go back. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so excited for this. I think that this is going to feel so much better. I've been talking a lot about like peripherally, Jupiter and Gemini, along with Mars and Cancer, I feel like has created a collective air of like, not to be dramatic, but despair, like hopelessness. And of course, there's a lot we could talk about in the mundane that might be contributing to that. But I think spiritually, like we can see that reflected in those placements. It's just tough. And specifically with Mars and Cancer, I think about um, like having difficult feelings and not knowing what to do with them, or feeling like you can't express them, or feeling like you're in pain and not knowing how to ask for help. Like there's just a lot of strife, I think, with this particular placement. And we've been working through it since September of last year. It's a long ass time. So, what I'm getting with this Mars and Leo from a general perspective is courage for sure. And then with the aspects it's going to make in April, it feels extremely cathartic. Like I know an opposition to Pluto sounds ooh, but and call me just like the Pisces optimist, but I feel really good about that. I feel like this is the moment, like you said, closing the chapter, but almost doing so as like we can put this to rest, we can put this to bed, like whatever it was that kind of got worked through and worked out with Mars in Cancer, and even through the retrograde specifically, there's something that we're just sort of figuring out. And therefore, we can kind of move on from it in a really courageous and powerful way. It feels very cleansing. It feels very transcendent. I'm thinking now about the trine to Neptune, just like I'm getting the picture of like a runner crossing the finish line almost. Like there's something very celebratory and empowering about this moment, I think.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I think you're right. It's Mars in Cancer, it's like, is a lot like we were talking before we got on the recording, it's like a lot of feels, but not knowing there's not a lot you can really do with it, or it just feels like it's you're a little stuck, but and you want to do something because Mars wants to do, but sometimes, with your feelings are your feelings. They're just gonna be there until they move through, or you're gonna, have to wade through those feelings. I remember when I was younger at East Ham, out on Cape Cod, where I would go with my parents. There's this beach that you wade for like a mile out because the way the tide is configured and the beach is configured. And it feels like that when Mars is in a water sign. Like you want to go out and explore, but you have to wade. The water kind of weighs you down. And this Mars and Leo is a whole different feeling. And I think that there's something to it. I think cathartic is exactly the perfect phrase for it. Is Mars completes this cycle with Pluto, because Mars began the cycle with Pluto in November. There was a midpoint in January, and now that's finishing up here in April. It does feel like the final sort of kaboom of,
Mm-hmm.
oh, all this stuff that got kind of churned up and I had to go back over and understand and be emotionally present with, and maybe even feel scared for the safety of the places that I wanted to feel safe but didn't feel safe. That's a very Moon Mars type of a thing. Mars opposing Pluto here feels like there's a there's a punctuation mark on the end of that story that feels very like it's like an exclamation part mark. Like,
Yeah.
I got through that. I got through that. I don't even know how this transformed me, but it transformed me. And as this there's this opposition to Pluto happening as Mars enters Leo, there is kind of a like, you can do this. You have
Mhm.
courage. You're gonna be all right. Like you got a little mojo back.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so exactly. I think that too. And like we've been saying, we've said at the end of every podcast, just as words of encouragement, Jupiter is moving into Cancer June 9th. So Mars, I've been explaining to clients, Mars in Cancer has been like when you bring a pair of pants to the tailor and the tailor rips open the seam
Hmm.
and they cut down the seam. That's Mars, and then Jupiter's going to come in June and start to stitch those things back up. May not be
Love
exactly the
it.
same, but stitch it back together again. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I completely agree. There's a sense of I think what's made, not to get us off topic here, but I think
Mm.
what's made the past couple of months from a spiritual angle feel so challenging is like not being able to see that big picture. And I come back to Jupiter and Gemini for that. Like where are we going? What are we doing? What is all this for? And it feels hard and I'm sad and I'm
Yeah,
grieving or whatever. I completely agree. Where the big picture is coming back.
yeah,
It's coming
yep,
back.
yeah, yeah. It's coming back, and I think Mars and Leo too, at its best, is courageous and magnanimous, and um, fights for a noble cause. At its best, at its worst, can be just bombastic, raging narcissist. But that's a story for another day. Um, but I think of when I see especially Saturn and Pisces, Mars trining Neptune. So let me just give a really I don't know if I've given this example on the podcast before, but someone who has a lot of Pisces and Leo in her chart is Glenn Close. And I went to see 2017, one of the highlights of my life. I went to see Glenn Close on Broadway because she was reprising her role as Norma Desmond, and it was Pride. So I went to the theater, and it's chock full of gay men because it's Pride and it's Broadway. And she walks on stage and she just owns that stage. She's a Leo rising. I checked her chart, of course. And she's like, she walks out, she owns it. You could feel her walking. She didn't do anything, and everybody just goes bananas. Like it's a whole, theater of gay men drop like going apeshit because it's like Glenn Close being fabulous and her fabulous stuff. But the reason I say that is because she was exuding that quality of Leo that is Leo at its best, filling the room with energy, radiating light into the room, radiating its presence, the presence of a sort of comfort and a kind of beauty into the room. And I think Mars and Leo might feel like when we're in Cancer, you felt like it's the sign of the moon. It's more introverted. It's more inside. It's more secretive in some ways. Not always in a bad way, but keeps things to itself. In Leo, there's more of like I get to share. No, I get to give. I get to what I've learned over the last 7 or 8 months. I get to share that outwards. I get to be courageous in the way I share whatever I've learned, even if that's unconscious in some way. So I think Pluto provides a good sort of like um again, like kind of punctuation mark in that process. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Love it.
Cool. All
Are we
right.
ready?
So
Can we
are we
do it?
ready? Okay.
Yeah.
So Pisces, we're starting with you. We're starting with you. I am going to figure out how to do this. We're going to spin the wheel until we get Pisces on the ascendant. That's what we're
You
going to
got
do.
it.
Yeah. Spinning the wheel of the zodiac. Here we go. Okay. This always reminds me of Wheel of Fortune. I used to watch Wheel of Fortune with my grandmother in the 80s because she had like a huge thing for Patsy
Oh,
and
I love
Jack.
that. Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
All the old
Pat.
ladies in the 80s. Yeah,
Yeah.
she just yeah, I don't know what if there's anything up with him, but I remember I always used to love that when I was a kid. Anyways, here we are, Pisces. Pisces rising. We are beginning here with Mars uh moving from its retrograde in Cancer into Leo, direct motion in your sixth house. So moving from Cancer, your fifth house, into Leo, your sixth house, opposing Pluto in your 12th house. Dana, do you want me to just start with this one and we'll
Go for
switch
it.
back and
Yeah.
forth? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Um, I like this one because I think it may not altogether be easy. When you get sixth house transits, sometimes those can be challenging transits, and they can take you on unanticipated detours you haven't been expecting. Sometimes there's some challenge that comes up, there's some sacrifice required. But what I love about the opposition to Pluto in the 12th house is that Pluto is kind of made for the 12th house, in my opinion. It's you're almost I think of like, my partner really loves to play video games, and there's always like you unlock a secret, you unlock a potential, you unlock something like I'm such a 90s girlfriend. I'm like sitting there like watching him play video games, but I'm like, there's like an unlocking of a secret there. There's an unlocking, there's something that Pluto is holding for you. That may have its roots back in January when this opposition happened by Mars's retrograde motion. And there's something that can be revealed maybe by, sometimes I think the water signs, because they're so private and they have these private inner spaces, can become so internal that they forget that you need community and help. And that Pluto and Aquarius is about like, I need to seek out connection. I need to seek out mirroring. I need to seek out co-regulation of some kind in order to help me through this time. But Mars and Leo in the sixth house, Mars's joy is the sixth house, and that gives you powerful fuel
Mhm.
and tenacity. And like I said, in the intro, this idea of the sort of warm magnanimity, if you can bring like a magnanimous, generous, courageous, creative attitude, there's a lot here, I think, that can be discovered and maybe sets you on a slightly different path, but sometimes that's not the worst thing in the world to go on those different paths.
Yeah.
Even if they're uncomfortable at first.
Yeah. Well said. Huh. I like this a lot too. I'm kind of taking this from a bit of a gestalt, kind of like what's standing out to me. I tend to do this, so sorry if we're gonna get a little off topic for a second, but I can't help but talk about what's going on in Pisces for Pisces risings. I mean,
Mm.
this is a big deal. You guys have had Saturn in your first house for a hot minute. You can see Venus and the North Node are conjunct here. I think what Venus, or excuse me, what Pisces is so good at, or what it has the capacity to be so good at, is surrender. And I kind of feel like that's what Mars in the sixth is also asking for. Like Mars in Leo is courageous, right? But and it can be, in its best case scenario, it can be very brave. And I think the bravery that you might be called upon is maybe something around surrender and letting go, like trusting that things are going to work out. And to your point, Alex, like Pluto in the 12th, I think for all of us, this opposition with Mars and Pluto is a bit like walking over the coals. Like there's a facing your fear, a kind of like back to the video game analogy, like the final boss moment of like, okay, like it's browser or not browser, Bowser. I haven't played Mario in a long time, clearly, but there is like this thing of like the bravery is in the surrender or um you know allowing that thing that maybe you've been running from or trying to avoid to just come up, to just happen, to not try to fix or contain or uh you know react, but just allow.
Yeah.
And I think that that is much easier said than done and requires a lot of bravery, but this is a moment where you can do that.
Beautiful. I love that. I'm glad you brought up that first house stuff. That's super important. Also, Mars, like we were saying in the intro too, Mars trining Neptune in your second house.
Mhm.
Stay centered in your value. Stay sent. Don't sacrifice your value or think you need to be redeemed for something bad, and then you're not worth it because of that. That Neptune in the second house really spoke out to me as you were talking about that idea of surrender and staying centered inside of like, I'm courageous, I have value, I have worth, I'm getting through
Yeah.
this. That sort of feeling. Yeah.
I think that is where the courage can come from.
Yeah.
When you know what you stand for, that's what allows you to be courageous. Thank
Mm,
you for bringing that up. That's good.
I love that. I love that.
We're
Awesome.
killing it. We're crushing it.
Yeah, we are. We got down. Now, let's go on to Aquarius. Ah.
I'm feeling that Mars and Leo already.
Hi, Pisces. Here we go. Aquarius. Okay, so I might have to redo this in a second because Mars will move back into Cancer, but whatever. All right, so for Aquarius, go for it, Dana.
Okay. All right, here we go. Mars is in your seventh house. And so this might be not about you. It might be about the people in your life, the partnerships, um, There might be something you're doing with your partners that requires that courage, that bravery. The trine is happening to your third house. I kind of wonder about siblings, just as like a off the top, like how are your siblings maybe involved in this moment of what's requiring you to be brave? Pluto's in your first house, so obviously Pluto's going to be here for a long time. But I think in the scheme of like, what's happening right now and within the next couple of months, this is kind of a high point for me. It's the third and final time that this is going to happen in this span of time that we're living in. You shedding? Like, what are you letting go of in terms of how you relate to people, and how does that reflect some truth back to you about who you're becoming and who you want to be? Um, the trine again, maybe not just siblings, but we always talk about the third house is like the water you swim in. I wonder if, sometimes I have these realizations where, and I just told this story actually on my podcast, where I realize I'm the problem. Where, and it's specifically my perspective. Like, for example, I was working in a really hard school and I wanted to leave. Like, I almost left in the middle of the day and never came back. And I realized, luckily, that I needed to change how I was looking at the situation. Like, it was a hard and difficult situation, and I did want to leave, but I was making it harder than it needed to be. So that transcendence of Neptune is kind of reminding me of that vibe of like, you know what? Maybe it doesn't have to be hard. Like maybe I can find some ease and some serenity and some transcendence in this environment without blowing everything up.
Oh, I love that.
That's what I'm thinking of.
I just thought, well, it made me, as people who listen to this podcast know, my ascendant ruler, the sun is directly conjunct Neptune almost to the minute in my chart. So I'm getting a PhD on Neptune in this lifetime, and that is how you work with Neptune. That is, I've learned, you have to. It's scary because you can't often see about 2 feet in front of your face, but you can trust that if you let when you try to make things happen with Neptune, it often doesn't work very well. But when you let that sort of wave of sort of multidimensional whatever Neptune represents carry you, so much easier. I love that point on it. Yeah. Um, one of the things I was thinking of too, Dana, as you were talking about this, I think, is it's not all about you.
Mhm.
That feeling of more like, this may be about somebody else in your life. Mars is specific transit, but it's related to the Pluto in the first house, which is something about how you see yourself or your own identity. So it's indirectly about you, but our relationships are like that. What we see in another person, how we relate to another person. God knows even part of our healing journeys sometimes can only happen with other people. Um, and I think that, I was thinking about today at the gym that, the seventh house to me, this is not technical astrology. It's just something I've noticed over the years. It also can be like what we're drawn to, what we're aware of, and sort of like a reflection of, we know ourselves, but like the things that the type of people we kind of like or kind of like catch our eye. Like I'm a Leo rising. I'm very drawn to Aquarian type people. I'm very, kind of just do their own thing, march to their own drummer, kind of eccentric in some way. I mean that in the best way possible, Aquarius is. And I think that there might be something here where Mars moves into your seventh house, and it's like there's more of a direction about like I'm moving towards I'm allowing myself to sort of like what I like. I'm not going to feel like I even have to stay in any convention. Because even with Aquarius, sometimes you can get into like the unconventional becomes conventional in a way. It's like I'm doing it unconventionally just because it's unconventional. It's like, but what do you want to do? What are you pulled towards? What are the type of people you want to be around? Specifically for yourself. And that with Pluto, I think sometimes Pluto usually brings some realizations that are harder to see, especially in the first house, but really helpful. Like the truth that kind of like helps you relax and then you go shit at the same time. It's like, I think
Yeah.
it's Gloria Steinem's quote, like, the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. Um, there's that kind of feeling to me around this. But I love what you're saying about Neptune, and I've had those experiences too, where it's like slow your roll, let it carry you. Yeah,
So the sun and Neptune are conjunct in your chart, is what you said?
yeah, yeah. In Sag, lots of Neptune.
Yeah. You know what? That tracks for you. right?
Yeah.
Like you are very Neptune, I would
Hmm.
say.
Hmm.
Anyway, tangent, but
Thanks.
I'm glad to know that about you because that makes
Thanks.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I'll as I move us towards spin the wheel here towards Capricorn. One of my clients years ago, a yoga client of mine, before I did any of this stuff, she said, "You're kind of elusive." And I was like, that's an interesting word to use. I don't know exactly what the context was. I just remember her saying it to me. But it was not long after that, I had a reading, and the astrologer was like, "Well, your son's conjunct Neptune." I'm like, what does that mean? Like, it's like,
Okay.
she's like, it's hard to kind of place. Like, there's a little bit of like, and I can be
Hmm.
like that. I can be very direct and sun-like, and I can also be very kind of allow the fog to move. But thank you for that. I always love
I know it's
like
so
hearing
fun
the chats.
to learn about your friends, you know. I want to see everybody's chart. So
I know, I know, I know. True to Capricorn?
let's
You
do
good with
it.
Aquarius? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Caps. So you have Mars moving from retrograde in Cancer in your seventh house to um, direct motion into Leo in your eighth house and opposing Pluto in your second house. Okay. The first thing I think of, and I'm just talking about what I've seen in practice over the last few months, is strife in relationships, things that have not been talked about that needed to be talked about. Sometimes, Mars, I think, in the seventh house for Cap risings can be, you know how like when you're in a relationship and you feel it's your duty, or, I think Caps can feel like this, it's your duty or your responsibility to uphold part of the relationship, but it's like, but this doesn't feel fair or right. So you just kind of hold it down because you're responsible. Mars doesn't let that shit fly. Mars comes into the seventh house in Cancer and is like, this has been comfortable and kind of kept us in this nice shell, but I'm not happy, or I need to say something about this, or I need to express something about this that might rock the boat, which can feel with Mars and Cancer particularly uncomfortable because all of a sudden it's like that private, safe little world of the moon doesn't quite feel so protected. But sometimes those conversations or um, those are just necessary, for a relationship to grow, for a relationship to move on. Sometimes it's the end of the relationship, sometimes it's not. But all that stuff around relationships, now Mars moves into Leo in the eighth house. You know, what comes to me, Dana, and I would love your thoughts on this too, is going along with that idea of Capricorns can be very responsible, very diligent, very hardworking, very achievement oriented. I think it can be very hard for them to rely on other people. That's my experience with Capricorns. It could be a
Hmm.
difficulty in sort of saying like, someone else can deal with that. It's okay if I go for away for the weekend and someone else, takes care of whatever's going on with my business, or someone else takes care of my kids or my cat or whatever it is. Mars moving into Leo in the eighth house might be the courage of fully letting go of caring what other people think about how much you're doing and how responsible and diligent you are, asking for help,
Yeah.
asking, maybe even asking for resources, as hard as that can be for your pride sometimes. But Mars and Leo, what I've always seen with Mars and Leo is when Mars and Leo gets choked on its pride, there's usually something that will follow that will reset that Mars and Leo relationship. Like there's something that'll say like, here's where your pride got you in trouble. And I feel like there's something here around like with the eighth house, like the courage to ask for help, the courage to allow other resources to resource you, that it doesn't all have to be about what you create and you achieve. And that might actually foster a greater sense of trust in yourself. Those are just some thoughts that come to mind around that.
I love that. I think that's an important thing for Cap Risings to hear. That's been my experience with the Cap Risings. I know, not to speak for all Cap Risings, but yeah, I think definitely this Mars in the eighth, on the surface, we could be talking about getting affairs in order. We could be talking about negotiating stuff like working with your partner to get a will worked out, like could be like a really specific, but I could see that because there is something about your resources. But I think with the eighth house, thinking about merging and the way you merge and having courage to merge, that's really cool. That's really cool. I like that as like a best case scenario for this. And I think what's interesting about that is like the opposition to Pluto in the second. Um, Thinking about it from like a spiritual point of view, like Pluto in the second might be helping you understand Oh God, here we go. Like there might be some low self-worth underneath that. Like I can't ask for help because it'll make me look weak or whatever it is. There's maybe an opportunity with this to unpack all of that. And I'm thinking now as well about what's going on in Aries. So yes, there's a trine to Neptune. We didn't even mention that what by this point, I guess like 3 weeks before was the eclipse in Aries.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so there is a lot of Aries energy in the air still. And in your fourth house, yeah, it might be about your family. It might also be about like you feeling like your inner world, your interior life.
Amen.
And so yeah, I think that there's an opening there that could allow you to see like, yeah, it doesn't make me weak to ask for help. It doesn't make me um like that's what my people are for. People are here to help me. They want to help me. If I let them help me, things get easier. It doesn't say anything about me if I don't let people help me. I think you nailed it, Alex. Yeah.
One of the, just speaking from the understanding of Leo, and one of the most helpful things that I heard from one of my teachers, actually my former therapist years ago, she said one of the greatest ways you show people you love them is by letting them help you because they want to help. You when you do it all yourself, you're basically saying to somebody else, I don't need you.
Yeah.
I don't require you in my life. And it's that sense of being interdependent with other human beings, not always in romantic relationships, although that's one place it definitely shows up, but even in friendships or greater community, like we're interdependent with each other. And people, as much as we want to give or we want to do, other people want to do that for us. And it's a sign of love, I think, that you allow them to do that. It shows them that they're needed and valued. And that this idea of this axis, this second eighth house axis, is a lot to me about value and worth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
It's
Okay.
exciting.
It
Go
is.
Caps.
Yay, Caps. All right, I'm gonna spin this way so we get or keep Mars and Leo. What are we doing? So
Woo!
Sagittarius, Sagittarius. I when I am this is what happens when you grow up as an only child. You sing a lot to yourself.
I do that too, and I have four
Yeah.
siblings, so it's
Okay.
not
All
just
right,
you.
so it's not just an only child there. All
Oh,
right,
that's
so
funny.
are you up? Are you doing Sag?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, let's do it. I'm really excited for Sag risings
Mm.
because Mars has been just fucking up your eighth house. Not to say it like that, but I am going to say it like that because it's been a lot.
Uh,
I think the better part of 8 months this is a lot for Sag risings. There's been a need to really work out like you're just talking about what's the me and the we. How do I share my feelings and allow someone else to like to help me with these hard feelings and ask for help. Now in your ninth house, there's a recalibration of the operating principles. There's like a new way of looking at the world, I think, is what's available to Sag risings that allows you to be more brave. And you had to go through the muck of the eighth house to get there. That's I see clearly with this rising sign, especially like how the work of Cancer, Mars and Cancer in the eighth can really benefit you now with this transition. It's a new way of looking at the world, a new philosophy where you can be brave, you can say what you want, you can do what you want. We've got a trine to the fifth house. Hell yes. Hell yes. I love this for just this is the life I want to live. I'm going to live it. This is what I want to create. This is what I want to do. The opposition to the third tells me, you might have to work some things out in your day-to-day life. There might be a fear around, who me? I can't do this. I'm a dad or I'm a teacher, or you get caught up in your roles of what you do in your daily life that somehow maybe convinces you like, or it's at odds with this like new courageous perspective. Um, and I think the walking over the coals for Sag risings is realizing it's not black and white. It's not one or the other. You can do whatever you want to do.
yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Oh, I slow clap. That's so awesome. And, it made me think of, in a real life example. So Michael is my partner is a Sag rising, and one of the simple ways this has shown up is, both he and I were single for a long time before we met. And, now we live together and we're getting married and all this stuff. And so sometimes I'll catch him like still scrambling to do things as if he has to do it all on his own. Or he'll catch me doing the same thing because we were so used to being single and doing everything ourselves. And I'm like, hey, I can help you with that. Like, I can do that. Like, leave that. I'll take care of it later on today. Or he'll say the same thing. I'll take care of that later, or I'll do this, or I'll cook dinner, or whatever. And it sounds like little things, but like when you've been used to kind of doing it all yourself, and I think Sages, we often have that sense of independent, explorational, don't, hold me back type of energy
Mhm.
that can also be difficult, even with simple things, to be like, oh, I don't have to be the one doing this. I don't have to be the one, and that there's, with the eighth house too, that's a place we face a lot of fears and deep
Mhm.
internalized fears about, like, am I safe if I let this happen? Cancer is the eighth house particular. Like, am I emotionally protected? If I let somebody else do this, am I safe? Am I emotionally protected? So even with simple things that come up in our lives, there can sometimes be when they really hit us a deeper underlying meaning to them. And I think you're right. Like this trying from the ninth to the fifth is like, mofo, I am here to live my life. I have my beliefs.
Mhm.
I'm sharing my beliefs in the world. That's the ninth house, sharing the way I see the world. I'm reordering it. I'm not scared of sharing that. And then the trine to Neptune in the fifth, there's something there about like, I love what you said, Dana. Like, this is the life I want to create. These are the
Mhm.
things that bring me pleasure. These are the things there can be with Sagittarius. Sometimes, and people think of it as a very me sign, but they can be very other focused sometimes as well too. And something about I can surrender to the life that I'm creating, and it doesn't make me any less independent. It
Mhm.
doesn't make me any less a bit able to do what I need to do. It just means I'm living and creating from a new space. It's kind of reordering what you said. I just thought what you said was brilliant. Yeah.
No, that was excellent. I think surrender is important for all of us with Neptune,
Yeah.
but yeah, they needed to hear that. That was lovely.
Well, thank you. Thank you. All right. So spinning the wheels. Let's go back to Scorpio. Oh, yay. I love Scorpios. I do. I love everybody, but I love Scorpios because I know a lot of Scorpio risings. And
Yeah.
yeah, this is one I kind of get on a visceral level. So here's what's interesting always, and I've said this about Scorpio, and it always is interesting to me about a chart, is that one of the most private signs, Scorpio, has the literal most visible sign as its most visible house. And Mars, which is not subtle, and your ascendant ruler moving into that house. So shorthand for the 10th house is career, career work, things going on in career work. So you may notice that if there was sort of a chapter in a saga that began back in September around your job, or I'm sorry, back in November around your job, um, something might be getting tied together around that. There might be a feeling of like having to take more assertive action, more forward momentum. It could be, being thrust into sort of a visible leadership position. That's another thing I could see with Mars moving back into Leo. Maybe if you had been thrust into that position, there's more comfort that's coming from that. I think one thing that's important here is just coming to me intuitively about this, Dana, is as Mars passes the opposition to Pluto, which is in the fourth house in Aquarius for Scorpio risings, you can be public and private at the same time. You can
Mm.
be seen and visible and action oriented and have very clear boundaries about what you share and what you don't share. I always love studying people and just watching people and how they are. And you watch someone like who can be very visible and but is also very private at the same time. I know there's a lot of strong feelings about it, but I think of like the former Queen Elizabeth II of England. She had that kind of feeling, like she was probably one of the most visible people and noted in the world, but there was sort of an internalized sense of privacy going on there too. There might be something here where you realize, especially with your ascendant ruler being in the 10th house, that you can still maintain that level of emotional safety, that same level of emotional privacy. You can be very clear about your boundaries, about what you do and don't want to share with the outer world, but you can also be visible and that those can coexist and they can be safe.
Mhm. That's so good. Yeah, I completely agree with that read of Scorpio risings. I'm thinking about the ones that I know now. Um, Generally speaking, I think that the work of Mars in Cancer is going to really serve you. Like you might have had to go back and think about, well, what really matters to me. Like I could see life throughout the last couple of months kind of getting turned upside down potentially for Scorpio risings, with the series of oppositions in these angular houses, the 10th and the 4th. Um, yeah, I think that this is a moment where you get to decide, I'm going to operate from my integrity. Like you figured out what that meant over the last several months. And now it's like the test is, okay, now can you do it? Will you do it? And it might help to in doing that to lean into that surrender of Neptune. So for you guys, it's in your sixth house. I think of this as like trust that the work is worth it, whatever that might mean to you. And I'm also thinking about one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. So you have the courage right now, you have the energy to go and do whatever new thing you may have been thinking about or wanting to do, whether that's in career or your public life. Maybe you just want to like, have a new style. You want to be like a different kind of version of yourself and test that out. Like it doesn't have to be a new job. But I think Neptune could be very helpful for you guys and just letting you kind of, yeah, find some surrender in the work, whatever that might look like. Am I like choppy right now?
A little bit.
Sorry.
A little bit. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. Okay.
Yeah, but I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. What do you think,
Yeah.
Alec?
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that, you know, Mars will always challenge you. And, you can say that about like, Saturn challenges you in certain way, but Mars is a challenge. And those can be really exciting and fun. And I think the challenge here is I can surrender and I can have control. I can be visible and I can be private.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be either or. I think the either or thinking might be problematic in this type of configuration. But Neptune also, when Mars is trining Neptune, and Neptune's that, trust me, take it from the PhD in Neptune. There is no either or with Neptune. It's
Yeah.
just there's no differentiation. And I think in the sixth house, it's like, this is where I am. This is where I am. This is what's going on right now. I always teach my yoga students the mantra of like, this is where I am. This is what's happening
Hmm.
because that's where we are, and I think the Scorpios,
Yeah.
their strategic mind is so intense and the figuring it out, trying to get through to the very base bottom of something is so intense that this is a point where it's like, I don't have to do that. And you might find some relief in it. It can
Yeah.
be both and. Yeah.
Well
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. All right. So Dana, guess
Here we
what time it
go.
is?
Yay!
Yay!
My favorite time.
Yeah,
I'm starting this one. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Here we go, Libra risings, my people. So Mars has been just chilling in the 10th for a hot minute, and we've been thinking about where we want to go, who we want to be, and how we show up in the world. And now we're ready to really go after something. So I'm thinking about the 11th house is the house of your aspirations. It is, also the house of like your benefactors, your allies. And so it could be about taking what you've been thinking about and like percolating on with Mars in the 10th and like bringing it to a group somehow. You could be joining some kind of group effort, but you also could just have the stamina, the clarity and the focus. That's one thing we haven't really talked about with this shift with Mars is like it's going from being a little like ooh that arrow is like more, it's tight now. Like we see where we're going. We know where we're going. We know what we want to do. Um, and so that might apply to your ambitions. We've got Neptune in the seventh house. So this could be about a partner. This could be something about a partnership kind of. I am thinking about dissolving right now, specifically. It doesn't have to mean that though. It could be that um, you might be like having some interesting spiritual revelations about your partnerships and about what they mean to you. As Libra risings, look, we need that. We need people. We need a sounding board. We need to feel connected. So there's, I think, some kind of spiritual lesson here. I'm thinking about the idea of trust falling for some reason, like uh, going for whatever you want to go for. That's Mars in the 11th, and then finding that people are already there waiting for you. You thought you were like jumping off a cliff, and really there was all these people waiting to catch you. I think that's like a best case scenario. The opposition to Pluto in the fifth. There could be something going on with kids. There could be something going on with um, fear around creating what you want to create. Um, is there a need to control or manipulate how the product is manifesting, whatever that might be? Um, and can you just let it be, as you were just saying, can you just let it be what it is and see what happens? And I think that's another impulse for Libra risings, not to project too much, but we do like to micromanage. And I think this opposition might be saying, hey, just go for it and see what happens.
Well, that's such a good point about the micromanaging. I catch that in my Libra moon, and I have Libra moon placement. I catch this like, but I can't, and you're just like, just let me do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me do it. Just let me, like, like, I love that. And I agree with that. That trine to Neptune is so interesting in the seventh house because, Neptune also can be about if there is, I could see this with Libra rising having a pattern of getting into relationships or a pattern in relationships of um feeling like you have to always redeem people. Like you find people who are like, I'm gonna see how beautiful and loving you are, and you're gonna love me so much because I saw how beautiful. There's something, Neptune has a lot to do with themes like I want to redeem things
Yeah.
even when they don't want to be or need to be redeemed. And so there might be a Neptune moving into the seventh house may highlight a pattern like that. And also it can be kind of like a homeopathic where it agitates that pattern and helps it heal and realize you don't have to be in relationship with someone where you feel you're constantly like trying to make them better or redeem something that's their work to do. And
Hmm.
that as you find that separation, it's a little bit of that micromanaging, right? You take your thumbs off the scales, you let the universe put its thumbs on the scales and work with that. Let that person work with their own inner self or higher self or however you want to say it. That's, I think, Neptune at its best, where there is that surrender, right? You step back and you say, like, I trust, I have the phrase I always use for myself, because I've had to use this in my own life a lot, is I have confidence in this person. I have confidence in their strength. I have confidence in their capability. Sometimes that means a relationship stays, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it means the patterns in relationships changes. But Neptune's settling in here by next year for a good, up till 2039 in that house. So this doesn't all have to happen right away. But
Right.
Mars accenting that is very powerful. And the last thing I'll just say about Mars moving into the 11th house is all I could see for Libra risings was the opening scene of The Devil Wears Prada, where Meryl Streep walks out of the elevator. The elevator
Yes.
opens and she takes
Yes.
the
Yes.
glasses off and she has that look. And then, she turns the corner and Emily Blunt's there. She's like, I don't know why it was so difficult to confirm an appointment. She has that. It's okay, Libras. I wanted to say, like, there's an inner diva living in every Libra. There's
Yes.
an inner diva. It's Venus the sign. It's okay in the 11th house to be the boss
Hmm.
sometimes, to walk in and be like, amongst a group, amongst people, sometimes you have to take charge. You don't have to be Meryl Streep in The Devil Wears Prada. It's a personal fantasy of mine, but it's not anything you have to do. And so there's a feeling of just like, it's okay to be in command in a group.
Hmm.
You're okay. And people, the perspective that you can bring from seeing the two sides of the scale is a very valuable perspective. Don't underestimate it.
That was good. Alex,
Mm.
that was good. That was good.
Mm.
I do want to be Meryl Streep.
Well, who doesn't?
Who do I mean, I'm looking forward to that.
Yep. Yep. I think Dana needs to make a reel for Instagram where she gets off an elevator and does this with the glasses. Rips the glasses.
I'm on it.
Oh man. All right. Let's get back to my Virgos. Oh. So I am the self-proclaimed Virgo whisperer. I get a lot of Virgos come to me. I've got three planets in Virgo, Saturn in Virgo. I can talk to my Virgos. Okay. Mars in the 12th. This is interesting. I think, what's interesting is, Dana, help me out with this if you can.
Yeah.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Is there a contra antitia relationship between Virgo and Aries?
I
Is that a too big?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Like, I'm
Maybe
not
I
gonna
don't maybe
lie, I
I
don't
don't go this
know.
detail. I don't know. I
I
don't
don't
want to go
work
to this
with
detail.
those too often, so I'm not sure.
I think there
Um,
is, but I shouldn't have brought in that. Wait, so there's Gemini, Cancer. Da, da, da. Yeah, so there is a relation. There is a secret relationship between Aries and Virgo. There's a it is contrantitia. Basically, like when planets are, I won't go into all of that. Adam explains that beautifully in a lot of his courses, but there's sort of a secret underground tunnel relationship between those two signs. And I think one of the things with Virgo is Virgos, I think more than any other sign, get sort of pigeonholed into this idea that they're the obsessive, worried, self-sacrificing perfectionists. And of course, that is an aspect of the sign. But Virgos carry a lot of power, and they carry power in their discernment. They carry power. I read I forget the author's name. I'm as gregarious as I can be. I'm also quite introverted. The book is called Quiet. I can't remember the author's name, but she was talking about how powerful it's about introverts, being an introvert, and how powerful introverts. Susan Cain is the author. That's just came
okay.
to me. How powerful introverts can be in negotiation because they're picking up on detail. They're
Mm,
picking up on the details. They're aware of details. They're aware of the body language. They're aware of they don't let something go because, sometimes they may feel hard to speak up, but they're very good at noticing and pinpointing details. I feel like Mars moving into the 12th house here is a little bit like helping you uncover your secret superpower. Something that you do that you don't know gives you power, or you haven't seen gives you power. And Leo being the 12th house for Virgos, would have a lot of Leo qualities to it. The ability to be seen and be courageous. It would also leadership qualities that you may not have recognized that you had. The ability to hold yourself strongly. I've had to learn like I can be assertive and I don't have to be a dick. I can just say what I'm saying. I can just say
yeah.
what I notice and be detail oriented. And I think for Virgos, that's with especially the South Node now transiting your first house up until the middle of 2026. If you have a story, even if that story has been put onto you by other people or astrologers of like, you're just a self-sacrificing perfectionist who cares too much for other people, all that stuff, you might dig down and say, like, but you know what? Actually, secretly, there's a place in me where I'm very powerful and I know what I'm talking about. And I know what I'm talking about because I'm very detail oriented. I don't let anything get by me. And there's some shedding of identity that the South Node is really helpful for that in the first house. Like the really ejecting old projections from other people, even other thoughts, whatever, even what astrologers say, if it doesn't feel like it's resonating with you, jettison it and
Yeah.
take in your own power. So that's just what occurred to me with that from
That
Mars
is
there.
so good. So good. And I also am drawn to the South Node here. I've been thinking about the South Node in Virgo a lot. I have the South Node in Virgo in the 12th, and I for the longest, I mean, even still, it's like a mystery. It's a bit of an enigma to me. I told that to an astrologer friend of mine, and she was like, "Well, yeah, it's the 12th house. Like, you're not supposed to really." And I was like, "Okay, you're right." But I've been noticing it a lot lately, and really like getting language for it. And it is, I think this is so helpful for Virgo risings, is what I'm trying to say. Not just because of like kind of cleaning house in terms of my identity, but the projections. That point that you made, ooh, that's so good because I think that Virgos can be, all of us can be subjected to other people's projections, but when you are detail oriented, you pick up on those little things that you might be a little more observant than other people. And that is not a bad thing. And if you hear people saying it's a bad thing and you believed it's a bad thing, the South Node is here to help you kind of recalibrate that.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, as far as Mars and the 12th, I agree. Like, I think that's kind of underscoring the same, it's like the same point, but from a different angle. So, whereas the South Node in the first house is saying, hey, let's just like clean house. Like, you don't have to be anything you don't want to be. You get to decide who you are and what your identity is. Um, Mars in the 12th is like, yeah, there is something about facing fear that's kind of amplified by the 12th house.
Hmm.
Um, and being unapologetic, being bold and assertive about like this is what I want to do. And I also think like I was telling Alex before the call, and I mentioned on our last horoscopes, my birthday was hours before the Virgo full moon eclipse. And that was in my 12th house. So I've had a lot of clarity on like what the 12th house is all about, just from a personal standpoint. And I've been thinking a lot about getting the language for something. Like when you have 12th house transits, you're probably going to be getting language. You're going to be able to articulate
Mm.
something a bit different. Like there was this feeling or this like there was something under the surface that was with you that you couldn't quite put your finger on. And then a transit comes through the 12th and you're like, oh, that's what that is. Okay. And I think for Virgo risings, it's like, this is what I want. This is what excites me. This is what I'm going to do. And you're
Love
able to
that.
do that maybe a little more easily because the South Node is like, hey, like we can be whatever the fuck we want. Like, let's
Yep.
go. So yeah, that was a bit rambly, but I think
No.
that there's a lot of empowerment to be found when you allow yourself to let Mars speak to you. Because I think it can be challenging to like let those 12th house vibes kind of surface.
Mhm.
Um, so be open to it, I think, is what I would say
Amen.
for Virgo risings.
Amen. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I have nothing even to add to that. It's beautiful.
Okay, great.
Yeah, awesome. All right.
And now it's your
Well,
turn.
it's the most wonderful time.
Oh, okay. I am really excited for you though, because and for all Leo risings. Some people really close to me are real Leo risings, and they have been going through it, like losing jobs,
Mhm.
just all kinds of tough stuff. So Mars in the 12th has been, I would imagine, just bringing up, excuse me, feelings that you didn't even know were there. And you're like, oh shit, that's that. Okay. All right, let's work with that. And so there's been a lot of behind the scenes kind of reorganizing and processing and crying, maybe, hopefully not, but
Oh yeah,
this
no, no, plenty of crying, plenty
yeah,
of
there's
crying.
some
Yeah,
crying. There's some crying.
yep.
Um, but this is like very much a new chapter. It's a new chapter for you personally. Like this is where I think more than any other rising sign, Leo risings are going to be able, if they're working with this energy consciously, take the stuff from Mars in Cancer and use it to step into a new iteration of who they want to be. Um, Amplified by this trine to Neptune in the ninth. This feels like a very spiritual moment to me. It feels like um, one of those moments where I don't know, like it's almost like you cross a threshold, like a literal threshold, right? You step from one room into another, and all of a sudden everything's different. Um, and there is a lot of courage that comes from trust, trusting in like the fact that your values will guide you, and that you can lean on them. The opposition to Pluto in the seventh, you might get some pushback. This happens when you decide that you're going to up level, and not to make it like about a linear progression because life is not like that, right? But if you are stepping into a new version of yourself, even people who are rooting for you might push back. This happened when I quit drinking, and I know I talk about
Hmm.
this all the time, but like even people who were, didn't really care if I drank or not, there was a bit of weirdness. There was a bit of like, well, can I drink around you? Like, are you going to be okay with that? And I'm thinking about something like that with this opposition where you're trying something different. You're like embracing a new identity in some way. And the people around you, they might need a minute to like get on the bus, or
Yeah.
you might need to help them get on the bus and say, yeah, this is what I'm doing and own it. I think if you really own what you know to be true about you and you rely on your values, your operating principles to really guide you, you're going to be able to meet that Neptune, or I'm sorry, that Pluto challenge with grace.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Dana. I got so for those of you who aren't watching on video, I just got really excited when Dana was talking about values. I was doing like a rooting hand in the air because it's true. No, that's coming up, and I'm noticing that myself. I think that Good, Leo is always to me about learning good leadership. And good leadership to me, as I'm understanding it and figuring it out myself in my life, good leadership to me is about sometimes making decisions that are right with with integrity and values that aren't always popular decisions with everybody else.
Yep.
They're not always what everybody wants from you. And I think one thing that what I notice for myself as a Leo rising is you can be a little bit chameleon-like. What's getting me the approval? What's getting me people to say this is good? What people like this? So I'm doing this because this person seems to think I'm doing really good at it. So what are you also then sacrificing because of that? When you're not in, I know when I'm not in integrity with my values, I know it. My body knows it. It's hard to look at myself in the mirror in the morning. You just know that you've betrayed yourself on a fundamental level. And I think what I've noticed with Mars and Cancer in the 12th house is like all of this really deeply patterned old ancestral muck that you're kind of wading through and like shoveling, like when you're trying to get the car out of the mud. It's kind of felt like that for a few months.
Yeah.
Um, that when you do that, it's a little bit like I have fought so hard to get this car out of the mud. I not nobody, but nobody, the devil himself cannot get me now to betray myself
Yeah.
to go back to that mud pile. I just won't do it. And I think that what you're saying is really it's this is actually coming up for me right now too in my own life in my own way is act in alignment with your values, to act in your beliefs. And that, Neptune moving into your into the ninth house, I'm really excited about because I think that that's a whole new like self-directed focus of spiritual belief that comes in. But that it doesn't have to be because you're constantly looking at the compass of everybody's approval rating about what you're
Yes.
doing. Even the people, this is coming again, this is from me. So, take this with a grain of salt, guys, but um even people who are authorities or are telling you like, well, Alex, this would really be the right, like, blah, 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 this to do. Is it in line with my values?
Mhm.
Is it in my values? I'm not saying don't listen to experts. I'm not walking into that quagmire. Please listen to experts or whatever. Please don't infer that. But I'm saying it's like, you know, let me say it better this way, just quickly as we wrap this up is, are you listening to people? Are you doing things and sacrificing your values in order to be approved of, or are you boldly forging your own path and staying connected to who you know yourself to be? Because that feels very important here. Maybe better said.
Yeah.
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 Love it.
Cool. All right. Cancer rising. We have moved Mars out of your first
Yes.
house.
Yes.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yep. Mars is saying, oh, so this is interesting because this, with Mars opposing Mars in the second house now, opposing Pluto in the eighth, and Mars trining Neptune in the 10th. I'm wondering about the Mars in period Cancer. Oh my God, Mars in Cancer period. This is what happens halfway through. We start getting punchy. All right. The Mars in Cancer period is in your first house where you're sort of feeling this is a needling of your identity. Mars comes in and provokes things. It sometimes there's a lot of, I notice when Mars transits the first house, there's a lot of energy I don't know what to do with. People hit the gym really fast, or start working out because they've got to kind of get rid of this energy. There's something here about have I individuated my own sense of self from my need to care enough that when Neptune moves into the 10th house, you can still have a very bold career that it also brings that sense of surrender and care and sweet and sort of Neptune-like qualities to it. And I think Mars moving into the second is really going to start wrapping up a story of you making sure that you're properly resourced before you try to resource others.
Mhm.
You have what you need because you need to also be filled in order to give. I heard someone say once, my cup runneth over. What's in the cup is for me. What comes out of the cup is for you. There's that you need to have the cup that runs over before you start caring and giving. And I think the impulse of Cancer is always to care and give, the home of the moon.
Yeah.
There's something here about this sort of self-direction of the second house. It's like, these are my resources. This is how I allocate them. This is how I want them to be. And since I'm doing that, I feel well resourced to allocate to others, whether that's financial, emotional, whatever it is. Um, and Pluto in the eighth, the first thing that comes to me, and I'm curious, Dana, what you think about this too, but like, the first thing that comes to me is sort of like a farm tiller coming into places where you've been bogged down in heavier emotional or energetic contracts that need to be turned over in some way in
Yeah.
order to free you to feel more independent in the way you feel valuable and worthy.
I love that. And I think like the through line I was hearing is this is a clarification of like of what I can give and what I cannot.
Mhm.
And I do see that in everything we've been talking about for Cancer risings. So Mars in your first house for forever and a day. It might have been health stuff. You might have not been feeling your best. It might have been more on an energetic level, like I just feel a little lost, like I don't really know what I want to do with my energy, with my time, with my it might have been an identity crisis, for some of us. So yeah, the tone shift of moving into the second is amazing. And I think a best case scenario is like, I know what I want to do with what I have. I feel like clear now after all of that on yeah, who I am. And it could, also then support or help in some way what you're doing with your career. That connection to the 10th and that surrender that we keep talking about with Neptune, that trust. Um, I think that trust that we're talking about for cancers, it might be trust that like I can have that firm boundary of me versus we, and I will be
Amen.
received well. Like it won't all fall apart. I won't be completely rejected. I'm safe to do that.
Mhm.
Um, and that also brings me to Pluto in the eighth. The fear around not merging, right? So it's kind of the opposite of what we said earlier. Where maybe for Sag, right? Or I don't remember now, actually. Felt like it was Sag risings, but I don't remember. Some another rising sign where it's like kind of scary to merge. And for Cancer risings, it's like, can I stand on my own? The
Yes.
answer is yes, you can. And I think this opposition moment is like teaching you that. It's the final lesson at this time, anyway, of yes, you can.
Yeah. Amen. Amen, my friend. Love it. Now, here we go.
Yeah.
Gemini risings.
Okay, Gemini risings. I would love to hear from Gemini risings in the comments about what Jupiter in your first house has been like. I'm just
Ah.
curious because I've been doing a lot of shit talking Jupiter and Gemini, and I don't know. I'm biased because I have this placement natally, and I don't hate it. Like I think there's a lot of good to it, but I'm curious for Gemini risings what this has been like for you. So let us know. As far as Cancer and Mars in Cancer and Mars moving into Leo goes, there's probably been a some confusion around like what do I have to offer, what do I have to give. Maybe it's been about actual money, with Mars in Cancer retrograde, but at this point in time, this shift is saying like I am kind of reorganizing um my environment. What does that look like? Are you waking up earlier so that you can have more time for yourself? I'm thinking about the joy of the moon being the third house, and the ritual of it, the ritual of your day-to-day life. Like that's kind of what makes your environment your environment. Like I come down to this room to record stuff. Like that's part of my environment, part of my day. And when I was getting back into, because I had a baby in 2023, so my routines got blown up. And when I was kind of coming back to like, how do I want my day to feel? What do I want my days to
Mhm.
be like? I feel like that's a very third house thing.
Mhm.
And so I think for Gemini risings, you are in a moment where you are figuring that out. And there might be some things you need to cut out. I'm thinking about Mars being, the energy of a knife or a sword or something. Like, what do we need to get rid of? What do we need to cut courageously so that we can do what needs to be done, whatever that might look like for you guys.
Mhm.
Neptune in the 11th. Are you dreaming big right now? Like, what is the big vision? What is the dream? What is the ambition? What's fueling that? And there's something like I'm thinking about how the vision can inform the daily
Mm,
life.
mhm, mhm.
You have this like sparkly, beautiful Neptunian destination that you're maybe striving toward. And Mars in the third is like, all right, well, here's what we got to like shift around to make that a reality. Pluto in the ninth, I'm thinking about a testing of the values.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think there might be some kind of test where are can you can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk?
Pluto is so interesting in air signs, especially I think Aquarius and Gemini, because Pluto is so primal and it's so instinctual and it's so felt that I think when you have, especially Gemini, Gemini is so used to being in the realm of information, cerebral information, data bits, that Pluto, when Pluto moves into Aquarius and it's in your ninth house, there's a visceral testing, like you're saying, and it's like sometimes an air sign might go right over that. You want to stay attention, like really be down in your body
Yeah.
and really feel, does this belief, this value, I just think it's so important you're saying, Dana, like, does this belief or value really resonate? Or am I just, or does it with me, with my soul? Or am I kind of like intellectualizing it or rationalizing it or looking at the two sides of it, which Geminis tend to do, the badminton game going back and forth. I think that's so important. And Mars in the third, it was interesting we were talking about that in terms of meditation. When I've taught meditation now almost 25 years, all different kinds of people, thousands of people at this point through yoga. And what I've really discovered is that there are some minds where if you sit them down and tell them focus on your breath, it's almost impossible for them to do. And it's not always based on trauma or some, psychological stress that's going on. There are some minds that are just filled with information. They're filled with moving thoughts. And so with that kind of mind, I think with like Mars moving into the third house here and being a Gemini rising, especially while Jupiter's still there for the next couple months, the way you settle yourself might be different than somebody else. It may be that you need to change I use mantras a lot with people who have minds like this, or I give them affirmations or a word to repeat because you just can't go to that space that's clear without thoughts or whatever. It's just not possible. It's really frustrating for that kind of mind. And I think Mars moving into the third house here it might be that literally, or in your own everyday life, just being like, I know I was taught to do something this way and it's just become so ingrained that I should do it this way, but is that the right way to do it? Like the third house I think of as all those things that are so ingrained in us we don't realize that they don't have to be that way. They could be different. And I think, Leo, wherever Leo goes, is like, you got to shine your own light, man. You got to listen to your own self about what really works for you. I think of several yoga students that I have still who they keep their eyes open when they meditate. They have to move their hand as they focus. They move their fingers just because they need that. And
Yeah.
that's perfectly fine because it accomplishes for them in their own unique way what they need to accomplish. I just love that you brought that up with the third house.
And I love what you said about air signs because that is oof.
Mhm.
All day long, all day
Yeah.
long. Yeah, and I bet, and again, confirm for us Gemini risings, that might be a lot of what's happening with Jupiter in the first house is it's like we're going here, we're
Yeah.
going there, we're going here, we're going there. Anyway,
Yeah.
that was good.
Yeah. Jupiter's asking for unification in a sign that doesn't like to unify things.
Hmm.
And that's one of the reasons Jupiter's intention in Gemini or in, has a tough time in Gemini is you're probably feeling the pull towards I want to unify things, but your natural tendency is to not unify them, is to pull away from that. So yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to Taurus. Am I doing this? This me? Taurus?
I think so, yes. And this one's
Yeah.
for you, Adam. We got you, Adam.
Adam, we're giving you a reading. Adam. So, in the fourth age of Middle Earth, no,
He'll love that.
I don't know. We should have, is my sound okay? I think I just did something on my mic.
Yeah,
Is it okay?
no, I can
Okay,
hear you.
good. All right. All right. So here's the deal, Taurus risings. Okay. Mars has been in your third house in Cancer and has now moved into the fourth house in Leo. I can't stop thinking about Uranus still in your first house for up until July. Uranus is going to, I think, moves into Gemini just after July 4th. There's This feels to me like one little piece of business that still needs to be taken care of. And I want to elaborate on that. So Mars moving into Leo in the fourth house. The fourth house, as we've talked about, Adam talks about this a lot, is a very private place. It's a very, the place where you retire to, where you feel like, you're home, you're safe, you're in your comfies, you're in, that sort of feeling. Mars moving in there and may feel like there's one little bit of family ancestral business that needs to be attended to. There's still something that doesn't quite feel settled in your private sphere. And for and once that is resolved, I think Uranus's mission in your first house will begin to resolve. Now, Uranus will move back into your first house, I think, in October and be there until the spring of 26. But you get a taste of what it's like to not have Uranus there for the first time in 7 years, starting in July. I'm getting the sense of like Mars here in the fourth house, Dana, being like, I'm really bringing to light one more place where you have to assert your individuality within your family. You have to integrate something ancestral. I just did this week a very powerful healing with a woman on constellational family therapy, which was wild and really, really interesting and sort of integrating that sort of stuff where it's like, that's my family, this is me. I carry these qualities from them, but I also carry qualities from my soul that I want. And I feel more centered and stable in my private life when I'm all of myself and give back the things that I don't need, the burdens I don't need to hold. That kind of, for some reason, like that, my brain is putting this together as that kind of helps Uranus complete its mission. What do you think?
I love that. I need to learn about, I've never heard of that. So I'm gonna Google that when
Oh,
we're
it's
done.
really cool. Yeah, check it out.
I do think um I am thinking about individuation now. And yeah, how am I think this is a good time to reflect on Uranus in the first house, like you were saying, Alex. Like this is a good time to just be thinking about what has this brought up for me. Surely it's been like you could probably think about that pretty quickly and know what this has brought up for you. The idea of this being like more behind the scenes is kind of jumping out to me with the fourth and the 12th being a part of this. There's something that's very much like I think you're going to need to engage in intentional reflection, maybe to like really kind of get a feel for where this is taking you or what this is bringing up for you. Because it could be a little more subtle. Um, I think if you do, though, I think if you do take that quiet time, it doesn't even have to be formal meditation. Just take time alone
Hmm.
and see what comes up. Because I think what you'll find is that Neptune will open you up. Like Neptune in the 12th, there's some very powerful insights available to you with Neptune in the 12th, but you have to take the time to listen and to get quiet. So do that. And then, yeah, I'm thinking about Mars opposing Pluto. And on the surface, yeah, this could be about work. This could be about someone at work kind of pressing you, kind of challenging you. And you've got to decide, like, how am I going to proceed in a courageous way that really matters to me? And I think to do that, you will need that quiet time. You will need to go to that safe space, that quiet space, and really think about like, what is the best way for me to respond in a way that feels safe? There's something kind of interesting about this Mars placement for me in the fourth house that feels a little different than what we've been talking about. It is still courage, but it's like it may not look very courageous. Like you may
Oh yeah.
decide to do nothing, but you are still being brave in doing that and you took
Mm.
the time to connect with it.
I love that for a Venus ruled sign too, because the Venus ruled sign will oftentimes be what can I do to make something harmonious and okay in the relationships. And sometimes it's like sometimes mind your business.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like let them handle it. Um, eh, I think that that's really important for any aspect of the chart that's strongly influenced by Venus, but particularly the rising sign. Yeah, yeah, beautifully said. Um,
my gosh, we made it.
Oh my God, we did it, you guys.
We
We're
made
here.
it.
Our Aries risings.
Oh, so this is me.
All
Okay.
you, girl.
Here we go. Guys, it's all about you, Aries risings. Like there is a lot happening. Mars, your ascendant ruler, moving into your fifth house, trining all of this stuff in your first house. We just had an eclipse in your first house. Like, surely there is a lot of focus on you and who you are in your identity, excuse me. Mars in Cancer. We've talked a lot in our horoscopes about for Aries risings how this has been kind of like we were just saying, like a moment of quiet, a moment of like going inward and kind of getting a little more clear on what you need to feel safe, and that kind of thing. And now you're ready to create, you're ready to make something with it. This could have to do with your kids. Of course, we're talking about the fifth house or the kids in your life, but um, with what's going on in the first house and knowing that obviously Mars is going to be trining, what I'm thinking about right now is opening yourself up to a new way of being, like a
Mm,
new version of who you could be. And that surrender of Neptune is like, can I just be myself and see what happens? You know?
uh-huh.
There's something really, of course, with we've said this for all 12 rising signs, there is something brave and courageous about it, but for you it's like very personal. It's about showing up authentically, as trite as that might sound, but like releasing fear around being myself. That's what I'm thinking about. And being able to create your life from that place. The opposition is reminding me a lot about the opposition in the first and the seventh, where it's like the groups you're a part of may not be on board right away. You might get some pushback of like, oh, this is what you're doing.
Hmm.
Like I felt that way. I felt that fear, like telling people in my day job that I do astrology,
Hmm.
like you never know how people are going to take this kind of thing. And so there might be something like that for Aries risings where you're like, I'm kind of stepping into this new thing. I don't know what people are going to think about it. And there may be some pushback. And that's okay. Like, I think what you can learn in those moments is who fucking cares, right? You can let it go. Um,
Yeah.
so that's what I'm thinking about.
Oh, I love that. I always joke like you tell people you're an astrologer, you're always bracing for that look like they look at you like you're either an alien or a serial killer. They're like, what? But the
Oh,
thing too about like what you're saying too, Dana, is that I've been really surprised in a pleasant way
yeah,
sometimes when I'm just like fucking who I am and I just say like, yeah, I do intuitive astrological readings and blah blah blah. Some people are like, oh, cool. Oh, well, I'm a blah blah. Like people you would never expect. I met an
yeah.
engineer once who did that. I'm like, I thought you guys would like. I was ready for like the whole like, well, blah, blah, all those sorts of things. It was like, oh, cool. Like, I was, how does this, it was just really interesting. So I think sometimes when you're brave in that regard, and you're brave about what you're creating, you're brave about showing the world what you create, you can really be pleasantly surprised. And sometimes too, the secret Achilles heel of fire signs is the approval. We harp on Leo for that, but I think all the fire signs in some way, because we're so visible, want the approval. And you will get it from the people who matter.
Mhm.
And the people who don't matter won't approve and they'll go away. Or you can set boundaries with them. Or maybe it doesn't matter as much as you think what they think. I think Neptune, I love the way you put Neptune in the first house is I'm surrendering to who the fuck I am.
Mhm.
And that might sound like with Aries, for those of you listening who know about Aries, that might sound almost like axiomatic for Aries, like of course, but it's actually not as much as you might think, and it's not for all placements. And there's sometimes the impulse of Aries and that sort of FU attitude is not based on any sense of independence, but a sense of rebellion and a
Mm.
sense of trying to assert oneself against something. And so this feels to me like, well, who am I when I don't have to assert against, when I'm not rebelling against, when I'm not trying to, F you, mom, I'm taking the car type of feeling. Who am I when I'm just independent? I just get to do what I want, and people can like it, they cannot like it. It's none of my business anyways. But I feel like, yeah, you're right. This has become after a long period of introspection with Mars in the fourth house. Not like I've said on many podcasts that we've done, over the last few months, not necessarily a comfortable placement for for Aries, particularly having Mars in Cancer. So yeah, I love that.
Mm,
We did it.
we
Oh
did
my
it
God.
without Adam. We miss you, Adam. We miss
We're here,
you,
man. We're
but
here. I put
we
in
did
the
it.
Lord of the Rings reference for you. You're welcome. I missed Star Wars, but that's okay. Lord of the Rings is fine. That's all we need to do. So this, yeah, it's shaping up to, April's an interesting month. May, I feel like March has been the sort of the breaking news um astrological month because there's so much going on. But I think April is really where the wind begins to shift from the
Yeah.
beginning of the year. It's the beginning, and I think as we get towards summer, definitely when Jupiter moves into Cancer and Uranus moves into Gemini, which we will cover extensively, you'll see content on that. There's a real change in the direction of how things feel. Things have felt very, obviously very intense for the last, few months.
That's been the
Yeah.
word. Yes.
Yeah.
Intense.
Intense.
Yeah.
Mm.
But things are changing, and I think later this week, I'm not sure about the order, but Alex and I are doing another video on Venus and Mercury stationing direct conjunct Saturn. That's another
Mhm.
piece to this. Like there's a lot of page turning happening in April. So
Mhm.
check that video out
Yep.
because that's another piece of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, we this has been really fun to host, my friends. Thank you all for tuning in, and we hope they were helpful and enlightening for your
Yes.
astrological month. Any final thoughts, Dana?
Let us know what happens, keep us
Yeah.
posted and come hang out with us on the internet.
Yeah. We'll say that, I'll leave with you guys with that is that I say this on my content all the time. Comment on what's going on in your life because we learn from that too.
Mhm.
The most I've ever learned about astrology has been sitting with people and seeing how their lives were unfolding under transits, and you learn so much from that. So we
Yeah.
all learn from each other in that regard too.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Cool.
we'll see you. So check out our video on Venus and Saturn stationing, Venus and Mercury stationing direct conjunct Saturn. We need
It's a
to stop this
mouthful.
one now. I'm going to reset my brain. And we'll see you all soon. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.